I guess the most outrage about Trump's behavior, and it's been called an attack on free speech, has been at the universities.
Yeah.
So he's refused funding for several universities on the grounds that they're breaching the Civil Rights Act. This is specifically to do with anti-Semitism and the failure to deal with anti-Semitism on campuses, particularly after October 7th. People are upset about it. Can you just lay out the situation as you see it? Do you think it's a free speech issue?
Oh, I do, yeah.
Yeah. So please explain.
It takes a little bit of developing, but I can do it relatively quickly. Harassment rationales have been the justification for the modern era of speech codes on campus since at least the 1980s.
What's a harassment rationale?
Harassment basically means that creating new speech codes and new restrictions on freedom of speech based on the idea that you're not stopping offensive speech, you're stopping harassment, was the same thing that the founders of critical race theory, including Richard Delgado, Mary Matsuda, Kimberly Crenshaw, like all kind of like coalesced around to say this is how we'll actually be able to justify a new era of speech codes. Because Richard Delgado was very, very, he's the guy who wrote Words That Wound back in 1980. And he wanted to stop, he's kind of the pioneer in stopping, racist hate speech, but trying to figure out legal rationales that he could actually use. And one of them was fighting words, which is an exception in the under the Supreme Court, which was a dead end because basically the fighting words doctrine is more or less dead in the United States.
What's a fighting words?
Fighting words is literally like a face-to-face confrontation that's going to lead to like a fight where like
if you say like, I'm going to kill you or something. Or...
No, that's a threat.
Okay.
Fighting words would be like someone saying, well, your mother, like some kind of insult that would make a reasonably macho.
Your mother's a whore.
Yeah, exactly. Right, a reasonably macho dude pop you one. It's a very 1940s kind of idea. And it's never been upheld since first being established in the 1940s by the Supreme Court, at least. So first, Richard Delgado tried that, but they also tried to really redefine offensive speech on the basis of sex or race as harassment. And they did this very directly by, I think at my alma mater, Stanford, they were saying speech that stigmatizes or victimizes on the basis of race or sex, which sounds like strong language, but it's incredibly vague, incredibly broad, and it really is just saying speech that's offensive on the basis of sex and race. So that was the original sort of attempt to have politically correct censorship on campus going back to the 1980s.
And was that actually implemented?
It was implemented, and it was defeated in court every single time one of these codes was challenged for, we started challenging them. So there was a period from about 1989 to 1995 where I think 4 or 5 of these were challenged, all of them shot down by courts.
And that period was the sort of first political correct.
Yes.
Would you talk about this in your brilliant book with Ricky Schlott, The Cancelling of the American
Isn't she the best? She's been on your show, right?
She hasn't been on the show. I'd love to get her on the show, but she is an incredible journalist. And I'm a great admirer for her work.
Yeah.
And she's a great person as well. But there's another book I highly recommend to listeners and viewers. But sorry, you were saying.
So the first great age of political correctness I define as 85 to 95. And that's when you had this politically correct kind of like, fever sort of burst on campus, the passage of speech codes, just really 10 years after the Supreme Court decisions that gave students very strong free speech rights, and about 20 years after the free speech movement started at Berkeley. So there's tremendous irony here, of course. And then they start passing speech codes to go after speech they don't like, very, very Marcusean. And that during that period, when a lot of these codes were passed, at University of Wisconsin passed one, University of Michigan passed one, Central Michigan University passed one as well, and Stanford were among some of them. All of them were shot down by courts. And so there was a sense that, thank goodness that craziness is all over. But when I started at FIRE in 2001 as a first legal director, we found that in some cases, language that was identical to the kind of speech codes that got overturned during the first grade of political correctness were still on the books, including one of the craziest codes that got at University of Connecticut, I make this face because it got overturned in an unpublished opinion, and I hate unpublished opinions. But the speech code at UConn was saying that laughing, like in a mocking way or laughing in an offensive way, potentially could count as harassment. And they still had this policy on the books at several schools that we saw when I first started my career. So harassment's been abused my entire career. So I think it's really important that people understand this background, which is why we at FIRE were very concerned that the administration was going with a harassment rationale in going after some of the really, and to be clear, very real problems going on.
So Trump's administration are using the old sort of left-wing harassment idea to take on the university's anti-Semitism problem.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's concerning to us. When it comes to, so one thing that I also need to establish, I think American higher education needs massive reform. Like, I think it's even if it was just cost and administrative bloat by itself, it would still need massive reform. But I think it has a very deep free speech problem and a very deep academic freedom problem. But when Trump started going after universities, I think the most vulnerable one that they went after first was Columbia. I think that's the one that you were most likely to get a finding that essentially they did allow an anti-Semitic environment at Columbia. I think they were the most vulnerable there. They've since settled.
How did they allow it?
That they didn't prosecute, they didn't kick out people who engaged in anti-Semitic harassment, and or for that matter, in some cases, actual threats of assault, for example.
There was some literal violence as well. Like University or Gaza Plaza.
Absolutely. No, Columbia allowed things that they absolutely should not have allowed happen. So they were the most vulnerable, but they settled with the administration, and.
What did they settle?
They settled for a large sum of money and a number of conditions that I don't think will actually fix the problem at Columbia. But the most problematic one, the one that we have the biggest issue with, is how the Trump administration handled Harvard. Now, here's another thing that's worth knowing. Every school in the country is vulnerable on a civil rights claim on the basis that they engage in racial discrimination in terms of admissions and hiring. And this is not just since the Students for Fair Admission loss that Harvard had about affirmative action.
Which was against Asian students, 2023, if I'm not mistaken, who sued. It got to the Supreme Court because they had not been admitted because Asians, I guess, would be a group of overachievers, and even though they'd succeeded, they didn't get in.
It's an amazing opinion that everyone should read, particularly the details of when they show just how extreme the discrimination actually was. Yes. And the deeply offensive argument was essentially that the Asian students got lower personality scores. Which was one of the tactics that they used against Jews in the 1920s and 30s, is they gave them a lower score on some kind of amorphous kind of like, well, they're not as cool, It's like, no, that's crazy.
Wow.
And so they're all vulnerable on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these schools actually did end up settling, is because they realized that they're doing something that they knew was probably illegal.
Yes.
But when it comes to the handling of Harvard, Harvard finished dead last in FIRE's campus free speech rankings 2 years in a row, and they earned that last place. So I am not anybody who's pulled any punches when it comes to Harvard.
You just published that like a month or two. So
oh no, actually the new one comes out next week.
Oh, okay. So this is from next week's. Okay, so
next week I can't say what happens in next week's yet. But this is the last 2 years.
Okay. Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.